Carl, my videographer here, has told me I didn't smile enough last time, so let's get the smiling out of the way. There's a smile for you. All right. We're going to talk today about socialization, the power of how we learn to be part of the society into which we're born. As we come into society, of course, we don't speak the language or believe in the religion or know any of the rules, so it takes a great deal of efforts to teach us how to do that. And human beings, of course, are kind of designed to be able to receive that sort of stuff. Today I'd like to talk about a true story of a guy named Larry. There was a young woman who was going to college, and she worked in an institution for people who were physically disabled, emotionally disabled, and developmentally disabled in terms of sometimes we might refer to as mental retardation. And she was a very loving, caring person, didn't have any great special training, but she worked with a lot of different people, and she picked up on this one young man who was in his early 20s named Larry. And she couldn't quite put her finger on it, but Larry just seemed like he was brighter than most of the other people there. He still had this institutional blank stare. He still had odd things about him. He certainly had some physical things. One thing she noticed was that he walked with a limp. That he drug his, I guess it was his right foot he drug. I don't know if you can hear it on the carpet here or not, but he drug his right foot when he walked. And when they'd done x-rays, they couldn't find any reason that Larry would have anything wrong with his leg or hip or knee or anything else. And so she started working with him, and he really responded to her. In fact, he obviously kind of had a romantic reaction to her, which made her feel a little uncomfortable. And as she started working with him, one day she walked in, and she found out that Larry had actually taught himself to learn to read and write. And this kind of surprised her because everybody there was considered to have a very low IQ and incapable of doing such a thing, and therefore no effort had been made to try to teach them that at all. So what he'd done is he had watched the nurses do staffing on the blackboards with chalk, and he learned how to read and write. So obviously he had quite a bit going for him. When she started spending more time with him, he started coming more out of his shell and started acting more interesting and lost this institutional kind of blasé look. You literally get that from lack of use of muscles. And so he started smiling and kind of getting involved in life and things of that nature. And then she started working with him, trying to teach him about change, how to make change. She wanted to get him, as all goals of all social workers and psychologists should be, is to get him to live as much independently as he possibly could. If he could live on his own, that would be the ideal goal, not to make people dependent upon the psychologist or the social worker. Well, she started taking him out, and she rewarded him by taking him out shopping, and he's falling more deeply in love with her as time's going on. Well, she's getting kind of concerned about this because she just wants to have a friendship and try to help him. And she starts looking into his background a little bit. And one day she takes him out to buy a suit. Well, when he's walking around, he's dragging his right foot. He's still got some of this kind of lack of enthusiasm on his face from the institutional kind of glare, the look that people get who have been raised in institutions. And she takes him in to buy a suit, and he goes in and he gets this hat he picks out. And it's a hat, it's got price tags hanging down. He's got a suit, and they're back there in the back room tagging him up. And they've got his suit, his suit legs rolled up, and he's got tags and pins. And he doesn't understand that this is not an appropriate way to go running around looking. And he's getting pretty disgusted with the whole situation of being in love with her and her not returning the affection and so forth. So he runs away. And this is his first time ever in his whole life being free of an institution. And as he's running away, the first thing that happens, it's obvious that he doesn't quite know how to behave in our society. So he's got this hat, he's got a tag hanging down like Minnie Pearl from the Grand Ole Opera or something. And he goes into this restaurant. And immediately, his first encounter with the lady, the waitress, she clearly picked out something was wrong. So she ripped him off for 20 bucks when he bought a cup of coffee. And he didn't know the difference. He hadn't really gotten the idea of making change and that a dollar bill was different than a 20 and a 5 and so forth. He wanders around. He's all excited being away from the institution for a while. He's getting a little worried. It starts to get dark. And he goes up to a woman on the street late at night. He starts talking to her, and then he breaks away from her and he makes a phone call. He knows to call the institution. He's trying to call the institution. In the meantime, this lady comes back to him. She's a lady of the evening. And she sees something's wrong with him as well, so she beats the hell out of him, steals all his money, and that's his first day of interaction with us, normal society. Well, eventually he gets back to the institution, and he improves dramatically. He learns how to read. He starts all kinds of appropriate behaviors that get him in a halfway house. And his limp eventually started to disappear. Now this was strange. Here's a guy who for 20-some years has had this limp where he's dragging his foot. And all of a sudden that's disappearing. Well, one day he just ran away from the institution and they never found him. They don't know if he's adjusted, what's happened, but he just couldn't take the stress with being in love with this woman anymore, apparently. When they looked into his background and tried to explain what had happened, it turned out that he was born probably of normal intelligence. He was born in the 1940s to a woman who was pregnant outside of marriage. Now in 2003 that doesn't sound catastrophic to us, but in the 1940s this was a thing that families hid. They sent their daughters away to give birth and kids were often secretly adopted out. In fact, my father was adopted in a very similar circumstance, in fact. And it was a source of great embarrassment in the 1940s. This lady made a deal with the doctor, her gynecologist, that helped her give birth, the OB-GYN, and the deal was, since he owned a home, that he would keep the boy there temporarily and then find good parents for the kid. And this way the mother could make sure the kid had good parents and so forth. Well, the doctor was kind of a scumbag, and he got more money for every child that he had in this particular institution that he owned. And so he kept the kid there and raised him just as he was an institutionalized kid with all these children who had emotional problems and physical problems and so forth. Well, why did he limp? Why did he limp? Well, when you looked at it closely, he didn't have anything wrong with him. His best friend was an older kid that he emulated, became his social role model. And the other kid had something physically wrong with him, so he limped. So Larry grew up thinking this is the way that you grow up to be an adult to do. So he was normal intelligence. He had all kinds of curiosity and so forth. He had been institutionalized, but he had been socialized into acting as if he were developmentally disabled and physically disabled at the same time. That's it.